webinar on data migration and how to reduce risk during a data migration. The Gartner study surveyed a wide variety of companies in 2013 and found that average data quality cost them $14.2 million annually. And the typical data issues they had were duplicate and conflicting data and inconsistent data, irrelevant data, and outdated data. They also found that 25% of critical data in the world's top companies is flawed. So that means the best you can do, if you're making 100% correct decisions each time, you've only got a 75% chance of getting them right because of your data. So how do you deal with bad data in a project, especially in something such as a data migration? It's all about data governance and making sure that your data is correct before it's put into the system, or its data is already in a system, to correct it and cleanse that data and get better value out of it. And that requires people, process, and technology. And today, I'm going to talk about some of our lessons learned over the years of doing data migrations. And I'm going to then touch on some of those points and point out how the people, process, and technology affect these processes or these points that we've learned, and how that we're going to focus today on some of the process and technology that we've been able to enhance over the years to help this process of data migration happen quicker, safer, and cheaper. So the 10 best practices for data migration are also what we call lessons learned. These have been learned over the past 10 or 12 years of doing data migrations on a daily basis. So the first thing you need to do is determine the purpose of your data. You need to analyze the information environment and identify where and how the data will be leveraged, and who's actually going to use the data. That's important. You need to thoroughly assess the information environment, determine how the data could be used differently tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow you would use data and analytics, whereas today it's just operational. Take an as-is assessment before moving data. We all know that data is dynamic. It changes every day. It's tied directly to the business processes and users. You need to establish data standards and define process rules for migration and future use of the data before you move it. So to do that, you need to look at the data, do some analysis of the data. So that's the process that's doing the analysis. The technology is using, we typically use SAP's Information Steward, which is an analysis and profiling tool that allows us to take an as-is assessment before we touch the data. You need to account for data quality, especially in the legacy systems. Migrating data is more than just moving data. You need to perform a quality assessment that we talked about in the last step and ensure that the standardization and rules support the target systems that you're going to put it in, and make sure that it will support future use. You should deduplicate, move non-relevant data, and put in, this is a good place to start with a master data governance or data governance process. Validate and redefine business rules. Your data must comply and be compatible with the current business rules and validation rules. Define the rules for the one-time data conversion and migration, and design them for adaptability and future use. Ensure that the governance rules are established early and who's responsible for the data. After you decide who owns the data and has the final say over the information, you need to establish strategic and operational data stewards assigned to sponsors for continuing guidance on scope, direction, and support. Somebody has to own the data. Somebody has to be able to break through ties on any governance questions on how you're going to format the data, how long you're going to store it, these sort of things. Somebody has to be able to rule over that and finally make those decisions within a governance and you need to have sponsorship from a C-level executive so you can definitely own that data and own those responsibilities for making those changes. Take responsibility for your data migration. You need to take, not only the systems integrator must live with the results of the data migration. Find the right people to manage the process and technology correctly. Be part of the process, even if you outsource your data migration, so that you know what's happening at all points in time, and you can have the answers you need for your executives to talk about where you are and understand and be able to use the tools to quickly show what results are going on. Number 7 is key. Don't rely 100% on the tool. While tools continue to evolve, best practices evolve or are made available to you as the customers doing this. A tool is just that. It is something to help you. You need to know where to dig the hole, how big the hole needs to be, how deep the hole needs to be before you take your shovel out and start working. The shovel will get you there, but you need the knowledge of understanding of where you're headed and what the rules are along the way. You need to validate through the process. You don't wait until the end and find out that you're going to be late on a go live. One way of validating through the process is using, again, a tool like Information Steward, and I'll show you some dashboards that we've created that will help the business look and see where you stand along the way in the process, how far along we are, how much data has been validated and cleansed and standardized and fit for use, and how much needs to be done yet. And that comes down with engaging the business. They know the data better than anybody. If business is not involved in your data migration process, you're going to fail. It is part of that people, process, and technology. All people that have to use the data and live with the data needs to be involved with the process in order for you to have a successful outcome. And finally, measure your impact. You need to take time in determining who should be involved in testing and evaluation and the final sign-off of the data migration, while be aware of the data ultimate consumer. After you go live, you need to focus on operational business processes to manage relevant, high-quality data. Now, how do you go about managing these 10 best practices and ensure that you have a successful go live with your data migration? How do you de-risk the process, if you will? Well, you de-risk any process involving data by having a robust data governance process in place. If you don't, it's a good time to start. You have to have somebody to help make the decisions. You have to have some tools to help you manipulate the data. You have to make the data fit for use. A couple of the tools we're going to touch on today that SAP uses and provides to do data migrations, and we'll talk about why we feel that it's best to use the SAP tools, because you're within the same current ecosystem with the company and the integration within their legacy products, such as their ERP systems and CRM systems. You have the legacy and native connectivity. Data Services and Information Steward are the primary tools that are used in the data migration. SAP Data Services provides a multi-user and shared development environment. It's an object-oriented and has reusable design. It has robust version controlling, check-in, check-out, like any good development tool would. Very granular user security and authentication. All the different transformations you need to manipulate data, change data, cleanse data rapidly. And as I mentioned, it has extractors and connectors for legacy source files. Not only just connecting to the system, but if you're connecting to an SAP system, you're able to go in and look at the data, not at the low-level table names, but at the business-level names. So you know what business partner data is. You know the different mnemonics that they use to define the data in an English-like language as opposed to the low-level computer language. The SAP Information Steward is another tool we use. It's also based on the bottom line that Data Services Engine is used for the actual profiling and functionality in Information Steward. However, Information Steward is built to hand off more to a business user who understands the data but doesn't necessarily have deep, robust technology skills such as SQL and programming language skills. It's a WYSIWYG system. It allows you to quickly ask questions of your data and get answers without having to wait into the queue with the IT system. Another tool we had recently introduced that SAP brought along is called Power Designer. Power Designer is a tool that allows you to model data for your target systems. It allows you to do lots of analysis and robust looking at your metadata. We actually use it to do the mapping of the data from the legacy system to the new target system that we're going to put it in SAP, and it allows us to build that mapping template in a place that's reusable. Now, the data services process, what you're seeing here, these are called best practices for data migration. These are templates that SAP provide to their customers. You can download them. Utopia also has an extended library of these. SAP provides for the common objects that people are moving from their legacy systems into their target systems, and we have extended that process, and we match the design and the quality process of building these templates, and they look just like the SAP templates. So these are the templates you can see that goes through a process and data services that allows the data to be tested against the configuration system of your target to make sure the data is fit for use and will enter into that system. First thing you have to do in order to get that data into that system is you need to map your legacy data system and tell the system, the new system, where to get the data from in your legacy data or your input data that will go to the output data in SAP. Now, within these templates, SAP provides an Excel spreadsheet that tells you the different fields you need to define. We've taken that one step further, and we've mapped that information into Power Designer. It then allows us to track different workloads, who is actually mapping the data, who needs to map the data, if that person is out, who should do it secondarily. The big thing here is the fact that you have a single place to capture that data, that information. It then can be exported from Power Designer as an XML file and used as input into data services. So you're not, the typical way of doing that is to go into the Excel spreadsheet and then type in the field name from the legacy system and then give that over to the ETL developer and let them go and map that data. That adds an extra place for an error to be entered. Years ago, an ASUG study was done, and it shows that 75% of all data errors happen by an employee entering data. Just because busyness, you're not watching when you type, whatever. But if you can take away 75% of your errors up front because they don't have to re-enter this, and you can use this as a reusable object and pull into data services, then you have the ability to be much more accurate in mapping your data from your legacy system. So that's one way we've extended this process from SAP with their best practices and added another one of their tools in the beginning to help that process be more efficient and less risky. This is just going through and showing you the different pieces of information in here that we use. We can, for tracking, all kinds of the different ways of making sure that we know how far into the process we are. Now, once you've mapped your data, you go through the best practices of data migration process, and in there, SAP has set it up so that the best practices for data migration templates will pull the configuration data out of your SAP target system, place that into a holding system into data services, and allow you to iterate through that data and check it for errors and formats and valid values before you try to load the data in a live function. When you do that, what's going to happen is that there's going to be exceptions, data that doesn't fit the format, it doesn't fit the proper values. There's no data in the field when it's mandatory. The three types of tests that it does for exception handling, and it runs through the data and it kicks each exception out. So if one row of data, for example, one column of data is going through and it has multiple tests, let's say it needs to be a mandatory field, it has to have a specific format, and it also has to have certain values within it. It could possibly fail 3 times. In the legacy manner of doing data migrations, you tried to enter the data in. When the data failed, it kicked out an error, and your job was to then go fix the error and run it again. So if that field had 3 errors, it would take you 3 iterations of the data to find all 3. You'd fix one, run it again, find another error, fix it again. If there are other fields on that row, you can see how this process will get tiring and time-consuming. With the best practices of data migration, you run the data through. Every error is tested for. Every field is tested for every validation function, and every error is flagged. So if one field has 3 errors on it, that field will get flagged 3 times for 3 different errors and put into a holding table. Then you have to go and figure out what the remediation process is. So again, there are 3 types of exceptions. There are lookups, which is values from the SAP configuration, could be states, regions, whatever. It needs to be a valid value. The mandatory tests are a field actually has to have data in it. Not telling you what the data has to be, but it has to be there. So you can't enter a null into that field. So the row would not load if it had a null. And then format means that it's got to be a specific format for like dates, phone numbers, IDs, those sort of things. They have to match the format. So those are the 3 types of tests that you have. And you can see what happens is it sticks these records into a field. It tells you what the error is. It tells you when it ran through. So now you have to fix the error. It's up to you of what you do. So we'll go through and talk about here's an error showing when it looked up in a field, it didn't match the lookup, so you can see that you have to find the valid value to put in there. Another one is a mandatory. That's the second one. Again, data has to exist in that field. It can't be null or missing. The third one is a format. It has to fit a valid format. If these rules are not adhered to, the data won't load into the new target SAP system. Now, one of the things that we've done is we've taken the Information Steward tool, and we have retrofitted with some programs that actually take the information from data services from the best practices templates. We actually pull all of the rules that are in there, and we rewrite those rules and these values inside a file that can be imported into Information Steward. So we will automatically take whatever data you're trying to load into a target system, and we will build the validations into Information Steward. We call this data migration content extension. What that will do is it allows now that data to be analyzed, validated by the business. They don't have to be able to use data services and understand data services. They can run the same rules inside of Information Steward on the data at any point in time, pulling the data from the same place that the ETL developers are pulling it from, and look at it and tell what validations need to happen and what's the progress. So the current data services templates, only the inputs that pass the validation are for load. Anything that failed is parked into that staging table. Now, we grab the data out of that staging table. We use our tool that we've created called Auto Designer. What it does is it translates the syntax and the rules from data services, builds us dashboards and templates and rules that are imported into Information Steward so that we can actually look at that data inside of Information Steward as well. You can see here are some of the rules that are actually translated and imported into Information Steward. You get your overall segment score. You can tell the last time you ran it. You know how many failed rows per segment. You can drill in and look at all the failed rows. You can find out how many rules per column, the overall score of that column, failed count per column, and failed data rows. The end result here is a dashboard where you can quickly look at and see on a daily basis where the migration team is. How many errors do we still have? How many have we remediated through? How many do we have yet to go? Essentially, you want to get all of these to green. When they're all green, that means everything is a go, and it will load into the SAP system. Again, you have your individual segment scores. If you run these on a daily basis and things are changing, you'll see a trend. Hopefully, your trend will be that your data quality issues are getting smaller. You can quickly identify issues by the color coding. You see the green are good to go, and Yellow and red are something that needs some attention. You can drill into the details and look and see how many rows and drill into the data as I showed a moment ago. Now we've also utilized a new feature, fairly new feature of Information Steward that is basically made for approval of rules and made for helping to remediate duplicate business partner data. We have co-opted this functionality that allows us to use Information Steward to actually govern exceptions. Remember we talked about those formats and lookup values and things like mandatory. You actually have the ability to go into Information Steward, open up each record on a case-by-case basis, and actually change the data and fix it. Now, the one thing you don't have when doing it this way is you don't have a connection to those lookup tables. You don't know what the valid values and such are. However, this is a much better way of tracking and fixing and manually governing your data than using an Excel spreadsheet and trying to figure out who's doing what and then count all that up. While again, it doesn't have the connectivity to the actual physical rules in SAP, it does have the ability to show you what errors were in here and how and what you can go fix it. So you can see here this one had an error that had issues with the region value, and the region was in, and it needed to be NY. So it gives us the ability to go in here and manipulate the data and change it and validate it. You also can track progress. You can see how many need to go. You can assign them, so you know when all of your errors are remediated. Now, that was using the Information Steward tool. Again, it is a much better way of doing it as opposed to Excel spreadsheets and handing it out and have people updating data and not being able to track it. There is the problem with the fact that it is not in connection with the rules, which makes it a little more of a manual process. Now, Utopia developed another exception handler with a partner that we've created that is tightly coupled with the data services technology and the BPOM process. It allows you to stage those exceptions for review. Users can log in the application and resolve the issues over a period of time. And once they're resolved, the data is extracted back into the templates and reprocessed by data services to automatically generate the appropriate IDOCs. So basically, it is another tool that we've created. Only this tool, as I'll tell you, it allows you to invalid data be identified by the BPOM templates and loaded into the exception handler. We call them cases. And cases are then triggered to individual users or reviewers anywhere throughout the enterprise. There's lots of stringent security and authentication. Users can validate, flag, reassign, and modify data exceptions. So the modified data can be reevaluated directly in exception handler. So what does that mean? It means that our exception handler has a connection to those configuration rules from SAP. It knows the lookup tables. So if I'm looking for a valid region, there will be a drop-down box that I can pick the valid region from. I don't have to remember it. If I'm looking for, if I type data in and it's in the wrong format, it will immediately validate that I put it in the wrong format. If I didn't update a mandatory field, it won't let me step off the record without telling me that you have a mandatory field. So it is in connection with the exact same rules that the business, the best practices for data migration templates are in data services. So it looks very much like the other Information Steward picture that I showed you, except this time it goes into a different exception handler. Users are able to correct and flag for additional review. Once all of them are done, they are then loaded back into the best practices for data migration templates and run through the exact same rules again. And they should pass this time as they've gone through the validation and everything in the exception handler. So now the output would be for them to create IDOCs to load into the system. So this is what it looks like to edit a case. If you can see that there's a transportation zone down here and the value isn't found. You can see that it's a lookup. It tells you what the error is. it highlights in red where the error needs to be fixed. Once you fix that, it immediately validates it against the rules and lets you know that you are okay, the data has been fixed. It also internally in the exception handler logs who you are, what you've done, when you've done it, gives you the delivery rollback, whatever. Here now we have the invalid case resolved. So as we built this, we built it for the best practices templates out of the box and the typical fields that you're looking through a data migration. Maybe you've extended some of your data, and in your data migration you need to actually remediate fields that have been added custom. Well, you can actually change these screens to add whatever fields or present whatever fields that you want. They are editable, and with your administrator you can actually customize what you're looking at and how you see them. So basically what this does is it gives you a place to manually remediate any data that needs to be manually remediated, to be able to track that, track the progress. If somebody calls in sick, you can automatically reroute it using underlying tables in there to the people who are going to actually work on that data in their absence. It allows you to manage this process and track it on a day-to-day basis and quickly get to your goal. I'm going to step out and actually show you a quick demonstration of what that dashboard looks like. Here's in SAP Information Steward, those different dashboards. This is for our customer segment. You can see the basic data, sales data, customer, partner roles, tax indicators, licensees. So all of the different segments that you're going to load within your process, we automatically build the rules in the dashboard that are used during that load process, present them in the Information Steward, and allow the business to go in and actually track in real time what's happening in your data migration process. So a little bit faster than I had intended, but Jody, I would like to open it up for any questions at this point, if we have any.
The first question we have is, if we already own data services and Information Steward, do we have to buy any other tools to do our data migration?
If you already own them, you're well on your way to having everything you need. And as a matter of fact, it is everything you would need. As I showed, that we come up with a version of exception handling within Information Steward to help speed your process. There is, if you wanted to go with the more robust exception handling process, there is an additional part that you would need, but absolutely not necessary to get it done, but it would help de-risk and speed it up. So Information Steward and data services are the two main things, and if you own them, then you can successfully do a data migration process with them.
Okay. The next question we've received is, can a data migration be done without SAP EIM tools?
Absolutely. However, I think SAP made the case for the tools by acquiring the companies that had these tools and made them their own, and so that they could then integrate them even further into the process. Everything that can be done in those tools can be done manually, just like from the beginning of time. However, tools like this were created to speed up the process, to de-risk the process, and to make the process repeatable. With continued best practices becoming available, this is work that you don't have to do from scratch. It's already there. So I wouldn't think that it would be a smart choice to manually migrate your data into a very expensive system and take that risk that your system's not going to be up in time when the best practices and tools are there and it's time tested and proven.
How can the business play a part in a data migration?
Well, it's imperative that the business does play a part in a data migration. A data migration, any data migrations in the past that have failed are typically because the needs of the business were not identified up front and adhered to going forward. And the adoption of the system is by the business users. So if they won't adopt a new system and you didn't involve them, then you're going to have the risk of failure. Subsequently, with tools like Information Steward, you can make the business an integral part of your process. They can help you identify pitfalls before you get to them in your data migration team. The business knows the data. If you give them a tool like Information Steward that is a read-only tool, allows them to do introspection on the data and help uncover potential issues before they happen, then it can be a much more successful team when they're part of it.
Can exceptions be handled manually?
Sure they can, and they often have. And that's actually the only real way that is provided currently to do it, unless you do like we have done and created that process to be able to sort of retrofit some functionality in something like Information Steward to give you a way to remediate that data. It's still manual. The issue is, though, you have more traceability, trackability, and visibility into who's doing what. Subsequently, if you use a tool like Utopia's Exception Handler, you have even more robust traceability and trackability and the ability to link directly to the rules so that when you're remediating the data, you know if it's going to pass right away.
Another question is, early in the session, you mentioned critical data. Who defines what data is critical? The MDM department, the business leaders, the business users, etc.?
Well, if you have a robust and proper data governance team in place, it would include all of those. Again, when one person makes the decision on data for everybody in the organization, somebody's rules or somebody's uses are not going to get picked up. Therefore, you're going to have an adoption issue. So if you don't include everybody in this process that's going to use the data or need the data, then you don't know what the critical data is. Now, on another role, you understand what critical data is for the SAP system and configuration because they have rules built in and tell you what's critical, what data we absolutely have to have. So some of that data is defined for you because it's critical to the operation of the application. It may not be critical to the operation of your business. So those are the critical data that you need to get together a governance team of all the stakeholders and owners of the data and users of the data and find out what they consider critical.